On today's episode of the Regression to the Mean podcast, we have three quarterbacks that we are prioritizing as must drafts in fantasy football this season. I'm your host, Shaun, and I am joined by my co-hosts, my good friends, and my fellow knowers of ball, Aidan Holler and Keegan Thompson. Boys, we just tiered the 2024 quarterbacks. Now we get to talk about our guys at QB heading into the season. You guys ready to tell me who you're flag planting this year? I know Keegan is.
Yes.
I'm
ready to chat about some ball.
It is not Aaron Rodgers. All right, Aidan, you're going to lead us off here. When I texted the chat about this episode idea last week, I told Aidan, you don't even have to tell me who you're flag planting, because I know who it's going to be.
Honestly, if Aidan didn't do it, I would do it.
Yeah, so Aidan, tell us why you're all in on Kyler Murray this season.
Yeah, this one is such an easy flag plant, must get in all formats, but especially redraft here we're talking about. The value is just too good at QB8. You look at who's around him in the rankings, and it's kind of a no-brainer. The guys ahead of him are Burrow, Stroud, and A. Rich. I think he has way more upside than Burrow or Stroud. A. Rich, pretty similar upsides in terms of the player, but I think A. Rich probably comes with a bit more injury risk. So I could talk myself into moving him all the way up to QB5 personally. And then the guys behind him, Dak, Love, and Purdy, I'm not taking any of those guys over Kyler. There's just so much to like about Kyler Murray. Dude's just 27 years old, coming off, a full offseason, so a full year removed from that ACL. So, figures going to have a ton more burst, kind of some of that vintage Kyler that we're used to. Looking at the offense, there's a ton to like. Obviously, they just drafted Marvin Harrison Jr. We've got Trey McBride going into year 3. Got the Dortcher Chamber, Michael Wilson, Zay Jones, nice two-headed monster in James Conner and Benson. And the defense really isn't going to be that good. So, we've got at least half of the games there in the Dome in Arizona. This is exactly what we want. If you watched our last video, it just feels like they're going to be in shootouts left and right. Tough conference too. Still playing the Niners, still playing the Rams, still playing the Seahawks twice a year. Those are 6 hard games. And then just looking at some past years, Kyler's done it before. From 2019 to 21, he was the QB 3, 6, and 10. He's proven he can be a high-end fantasy QB. Even the last 2 years, before and after the injury, he was still QB 9 on a points per game basis. So I absolutely love Kyler. We talked about him in our second tier yesterday. He's got QB 1 upside. He's got the skill set. He's got the rushing upside. He's got the offense around him. So I absolutely love Kyler. This is a guy that I'm going to be drafting, that I've already been drafting all offseason in best ball and making moves for in Dynasty. Once redraft comes along, I'll have at least 1 or 2 shares from all my rosters.
It just feels like such a safe pick with Kyler Murray.
Totally.
You're looking at his mid-range outcomes around 19 fantasy points per game, and then high-end 26 fantasy points per game. I think what the best thing about Kyler Murray versus say an Anthony Richardson, who I love, is we've just seen Kyler do it for a whole season. We've seen him be a top 3 fantasy quarterback, out of the gates in his career. Not saying A-Rich can't do that, but everyone's, the shiny object is A-Rich, right? And everyone's looking at A-Rich, talking about A-Rich, but I don't think enough people are talking about Kyler Murray. And I agree, man. It just feels like such an easy smash.
It could even be a boat.
It could even be.
It could even be Kyler Murray. He could even have a Kyler Murray rookie season. Keegan, I know Kyler isn't a complicated guy for you because he left the Aggies. But what are you thinking about Kyler this season?
If Aidan wasn't flag planting him, I'd be flag planting him as well. When I just think about the quarterbacks that are getting drafted ahead of him, Joe and CJ specifically, and Anthony counts as well too. Richardson, I'm just on a first name basis here with NFL starting quarterbacks, but you've got 2 pocket passers, you've got somebody who's only played 2.5 NFL games, and you've got somebody who's been a proven fantasy asset, and Kyler Murray, and his offense environment got better. And it's not just Kyler Murray was good down the stretch last year when he got healthy. The Cardinals were good as well too. We're talking about top 5 EPA per play offense when he's back in business. He wasn't using his leg as much just to use his legs, using them very carefully in the red zone, still looking to pass. You got an elite wide receiver. Trey McBride is going to be really good. I just think people are underestimating how good he's been because it's been a while since we've seen him because of the injury. And there's not many quarterbacks you can get after Kyler Murray in fantasy football as I look at them, maybe other than Jaden Daniels and Caleb, that have awesome rushing upside to pair with also just being a very good quarterback.
Yeah, and what I love about Kyler Murray in this specific offense under Drew Petzing is last year they brought Murray in, and though he wasn't scrambling a ton, they used him in the red zone as a rushing weapon. He had a
Which is what matters most.
We loved that. Yeah, I was creative that they were using him. I really enjoyed the usage. And then when you look at its range of outcomes here with the RotoViz tool, like look at these names. Like Cam Newton's 2015 MVP season is his number one comparison heading into this year of his career. And he scored 27 points, 27 fantasy points per game. Donovan McNabb, 26 fantasy points per game. Like Dante Culpepper, Steve McNair. Like these are all really
even his own
great
2023
names.
Season.
Yeah, like Kyler's going to walk out there and score 20 fantasy points per game, and it's like no one wants to talk about it.
No one cares.
I don't get it.
I care.
I don't get it. And it's just more excuse to talk about Trey McBride, who I just love. Love you, Trey. You're the only Trey. You're the only Trey that didn't hurt me. There's another Trey out there that hurt me tremendously. And then Marvin Harrison Jr. How can we not be excited? There hasn't been as many training camp buzz videos of Marvin Harrison Jr. in comparison to league neighbors, but I saw a couple videos of him just on the field with NFL athletes. And I'm like, oh, okay. So he looks the same as he did in college and so far, where it's just like this guy moves different. This guy's just a different tier of athlete and receiver. So everything's lining up for Kyler Murray. And then when you compare it against like Joe Burrow, and no shade to Joe Burrow, but you can't draft Joe Burrow ahead of Kyler Murray. Like you weren't doing that 2-3 years ago. You can't do that now. Come on.
The vibes are a bit worse around Joe Burrow, which who knows? Maybe we'll talk about in another episode. The vibes are weird with Joe Burrow.
Yeah, and then again, 18.9 fantasy points per game coming off that injury. That's no joke, man. Like he's putting up in his first game 17 points, 21 points, 20 points. He's scoring over 17 fantasy points per game and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 out of the 8 starts. That's pretty impressive, considering his team was not very good last year. Like it's a big deal.
Like really wasn't that far down too. Like in terms of his like rushing yards per game, like it was like 7 yards off. Like still rushing for 30 yards. That's an extra 3 points. He scores. That's 9 points on top of the passing. Like, no, love Kyler.
Yeah, I'm in on Kyler Murray. So what can go wrong, right?
What could go wrong?
What could go wrong with Kyler Murray? All right, before we dive into our next player, 2 things. If you're a part of the 70% of people that are watching this video that have not yet subscribed to the Regression to the Mean podcast, you know what to do. Like this video, hit that subscribe button, and turn on the notifications to make sure you aren't missing any of the content we are dropping weekly. And 2, if you love fantasy football and you want to compete for a chance for $1.5 million, you need to be drafting on Underdog this summer. If you download the Underdog Fantasy Sports app and sign up using promo code RTM, the good people over at Underdog will double your deposit up to $100. Drafting Underdog is my personal favorite way to get prepped and ready for fantasy season. Don't get discouraged if receivers have really high ADPs. Sometimes you just got to scroll the F down and draft your guy. But again, I think it's a great way to get prepped for draft season because, come on, you got to beat your friends. You got to beat your coworkers. The whole point is to win, right? Anyone that tells you fantasy is fun is lying to you. It's all about winning. It's all about winning. All right, moving on to our next guy here. I'm surprised this wasn't Aidan who's flag planting a certain rookie.
I need to put on a Bears cap here.
A certain rookie quarterback. I love when you flag plant a guy who's never played before because it's like I can't be wrong, right?
It's one of my fortes.
Mystery. It's a complete mystery box.
It's something I'm addicted to.
The Unknown, Keegan Thompson. That's going to be his album title, The Unknown. Okay, so tell us why you're drafting Caleb Williams at will and why he's one of your favorite quarterbacks on the board.
I will say when I think about Caleb Williams, I think about where his ADP is first to start. Right now in Fantasy Pros, he's quarterback 16. And we weren't getting that quite much of a discount for CJ Stroud, who I'll do some comparisons back and forth here when I talk about the two of them. But when I just think of Caleb Williams, the prospect and what he did in college is pretty hard to ignore. I mean, 21 rushing touchdowns. I'm just looking at his USC career, 21 rushing touchdowns in 26 games at USC. 524 rushing yards in 26 games, which I think is something that we don't really talk about. Like with Caleb Williams, we talk about him being a very creative passer. He has shades of Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes, but he knows how to escape when he needs to, but he's definitely looking to pass. Also, 8,100 passing yards in 26 games at USC, which was 47 more yards than Stroud had in about 25 games at Ohio State. He also had 72 passing touchdowns in 26 games at USC, a little bit less than what CJ Stroud had in his amount of games at Ohio State. And the reason I compare the two, because if you look at what CJ Stroud did last year in the NFL in his rookie year, a pretty solid fantasy season all around, right? 11th in fantasy points per game, a little bit further down in total fantasy points, but like was basically like a hidden gem in drafts. CJ Stroud didn't walk into a wide receiver corps of Keenan Allen, DJ Moore, first round pick, Rome Odunze, who's a top 10 pick. He also didn't have the same offensive infrastructure in the running game with DeAndre Swift, Roschon Johnson, Khalil Herbert, and the Houston Texans had a gang of offensive line injuries. I can't project that from the Bears, but like just from an offensive environment standpoint, I can say it's extremely similar, if not better, for Caleb Williams to walk into. I think from a pure fantasy perspective, Caleb Williams offers some extra rushing upside that CJ Stroud didn't. I mean, CJ Stroud actually did get 3 rushing touchdowns last year, had 167 yards on the ground. That definitely helped boost his fantasy production, but if you're telling me that I can draft QB 16 and have a potential, I'm basically thinking of Caleb at CJ Stroud season, which is 11th in the league in fantasy points per game, which I feel like is not a hard mark to reach. I think the offensive environment, it's really strong. Like I mentioned, the weapons are some of the best you could ever offer a rookie quarterback.
Yes.
And, I mean, he was electric in college. I mean, USC senior, like his last year there, he's running for his life and still pulls off 3,600 yards passing, 30 plus touchdowns. I mean, the guy is a football freak. It's exactly what you want in fantasy, somebody who knows how to escape the pocket, but somebody who's also looking to pass. And I love the environment he's in.
He scored 120 touchdowns in 3 years, 93 passing, 27 rushing. I mean, there's really not much we can there's not much we can say on Caleb that I feel like a lot of people haven't said. I feel
What's
like
there to nitpick on him too, right? Like as a fantasy quarterback.
Fumbling. He could just be a turnover machine. He's trying to do too much, right? He's way smarter than people give him credit for, though. Like he's really cerebral. He gets it. He's got high football IQ.
CJ Stroud fumbled 8 times last year and he lost 4 of them.
And it didn't really. No one's talking about the fumbles, right? It's just did you score touchdowns? Were you electric? Did you put the team on your back? I think the rushing upside's the thing, though, for fantasy. He scores 27 rushing touchdowns. The dude's really good at running the ball in the red zone too, which we want it. And then he has a running back who cannot score touchdowns in DeAndre Swift. So it's like a perfect marriage of perfect.
And I don't think he's somebody who abandons on the pass play, like so he can get out a run. Like I'm not saying Jaden Daniels does that, but I will say that Jaden Daniels is more willing to escape the pocket because he knows what he can do with his legs. Like, CJ Stroud had 26 total touchdowns last year, which is nothing to balk at, but I think Caleb can easily do that this year in his rookie year. I mean, there's real talk, and Aidan can tell me that I'm not crazy here. There's real talk that, Caleb Williams could potentially break the single season touchdown record for a Bears quarterback in franchise history.
It's like
not 20, that
it's for anyone. Yeah. I thought you meant rookie. I was like, he's going to shatter every single rookie record.
No, I mean, in general, like they've never had a 30 touchdown passer. Like 30 touchdowns would be a lot for a rookie, but I mean, combined touchdowns, I think Caleb can absolutely hit home in a environment where they've invested a lot in terms of the talent department.
I think a sneaky underrated too about his infrastructure is the defense too. Like this was a top 5 unit down the stretch. They could put him in some short, like really advantageous positions. Whereas it felt like, Justin Fields was inside of his 10, inside of his 20, seemingly every single possession until like the end of the season. They pick up where they left off. I think, the sky feels like the limit for Caleb. The infrastructure, the talent around him, proven production in college, like he should absolutely outproduce his ADP. And in my opinion, probably finish somewhere like right inside of like top 10 QBs and points per game this year.
Yeah, when you start to look at guys that rush for 25 yards per game in their career, and then also have the passing production that Caleb had, you see guys like there's Andrew Luck. You see guys like Patrick Mahomes. Like you get pretty excited about that. Like Keegan, look away, Zach Wilson.
I saw it. Don't worry.
You see Trevor Lawrence, right? So like, there's just like, and he's so unique. Like if you look at his sim score, it doesn't really match up with a lot of guys, which just shows you how unique of a player he is. A lot of people have comped Caleb Williams to Aaron Rodgers, and then you see him start to do like kind of the Mahomesian drops his arm, different arm angle, off platform stuff. You get a little carried away sometimes when you start to imagine what Caleb Williams can be. But man, I think he could be a hyper efficient red zone quarterback who's just throwing the ball deep to DJ Moore, who has a third down easy outlet in Keenan Allen, and then just Rome Odunze could just become the alpha next year. I'm a little bit more reluctant to proclaim Rome as the alpha, even though he's really talented and I'm a big fan of him. I'm just a big fan of DJ Moore and Keenan Allen, right? They're just so freaking good. Like they were so good last year. So
dude, even if they just had those two names, like minus Rome, like even if it was just Keenan Allen and DJ
Cole
Moore,
Kmet,
I would
of course.
still be saying this. Yeah.
Don't forget Tyler Scott.
But that's my flag plant. Like I'm all in, especially if I like, let's say I load up my team with a hero RB and like I hammer wide receivers, maybe get an elite tight end. I've missed out on, Allen, Hurts. Like if I end up with Caleb in round 10, 11, I'm going to be fucking thrilled. Sorry, no, less F-bombs. I know we talked about that, Shaun.
It happens. You get excited as long as it's not coming from me. But you look at the ADP here. You've got Caleb here at quarterback 14, 99th off the board on average. I get Jaden's got the rushing upside, but Caleb's way better than Jaden. So I don't know. I think Caleb could easily outscore Tua. I would not be that shocked if he did that. It's like, yeah, you could easily put Caleb in this top 12 area and you could, take him in home leagues. Caleb's going to fall. I'm sorry. Like he's going to fall down the board a little bit, right? He's not going to no one's going to be taking him in the 8th or 9th round. He's probably going to go in the 11th or 12th. So it's like you take a Caleb Williams, you pair him with a Jared Goff and see what you got. I think that's a pretty good place to be.
That is like opinion. My dream QB room. Caleb and Goff.
It's your two dudes. Going on our next guy here. Going on our next guy here is somebody I didn't think I'd be super enthusiastic about coming into the season, but the more I dig into it, he's somebody that I just feel like we've gone too far. We've gone way too far. We used to be a society here, but Justin Herbert's the 16th quarterback off the board right now, and that just feels insane to me. I know, okay, hear me out here. We can all admit Herbert had kind of a down year last year. The Chargers were bad, right? Like the Chargers finished in the bottom third in points per game. They were banged up on the offensive line. They were banged up at running back, and their wide receivers were criminally injured. And QJ was QJ, right, last year. So it was not a great year, right? But with that being said, how many points per game do you think Justin Herbert averaged with all of that going on?
About 18.
18 and a half. Yeah.
18.6 fantasy points per game. He outscored on a point per game basis Tua, Patrick Mahomes, and Jared Goff.
He's still good.
I highlight those guys because they're all going way ahead of Herbert. And I get it. Herbert is now playing in this offense that doesn't have any top end wide receivers, right? Looking at you, Josh Palmer, as your, undisputed X right now. Sure, the running back position's a bit of a smorgasbord. You've got ever injured J.K. Dobbins. You've got steady Eddie, Gus Bus. Who knows if Kamani Vidal will be anything? These aren't Austin Eckler, Keenan Allen, and Mike Williams surrounding Justin Herbert, right? So it is a big deal that Keenan Allen's gone. I'll admit it. But Herbert is now going to be playing behind a much more improved offensive line. They have Joe Alt and Rashawn Slater at the bookend. They've got Zion Johnson as a guard. Their center and guard combination. Who did they sign? They signed a center that's good. Quisenberry. I could be off here, but I know they've made some good additions to their left guard and center as well with Zion Johnson, Rashawn Slater, and Joe Alt. So that's going to be a good offensive line next year. This is a real adult coaching staff. Brandon Staley was not running a real program last year. He was doing cat cows right on the sidelines, but that was not an adult coaching an NFL team. Jim Harbaugh's a psychopath, but this is a real adult, right? Running a real NFL program here. And though people are going to roll eyes at Greg Roman because Greg Roman has an affinity for fullbacks, taking valuable positions and snaps from, say, a slot receiver. Greg Roman has extracted some ultra productive fantasy seasons out of Alex Smith, Colin Kaepernick, Tyrod Taylor, and Lamar Jackson. And though I love Lamar, I think it's pretty safe to say that Herbert is by far the most talented passer of that group of quarterbacks. And I get it. Roman has been known as a run first guy, but he's already came out and said, hey, we're not going to just run the ball into a brick wall. Like, we're not going to do that. We have Justin Herbert, right? We obviously want to have a run game that protects Herbert and makes it easier for him. But at the end of the day, I think they're still going to put Herbert in the best place to succeed. And I don't even think it's a Roman question. I think it's just a skill position question. So, like, I think Herbert throws a ton of passing touchdowns. I think he scores 5+ rushing TDs this year. Roman's quarterbacks get busy in the red zone scoring touchdowns. I think the Roman concerns are overblown. We want to draft good players. Justin Herbert is about as good of a player as you're going to get at QB 16. This is the cheapest he's ever been. So I want in on Herbert. What do you guys think? Did I sell you on Justin Herbert this year?
I love Herb. I've always loved Herb. Like, we talked about so much last offseason, and just, like, a lot fell apart around him. A lot of it wasn't his fault. It was
Kellen Moore.
We were doing tricks on it.
Kellen Moore.
We were bouncing for sure.
Let's not do the Kellen Moore thing right now. Let's save that for another episode.
Like,
all right, Shaun.
Through his first 3 NFL seasons from rookie, through his 3rd season, like, he didn't finish outside of QB 11. Sure, Keenan's gone. The infrastructure is a little different, but, like, we finally have the offensive line, which feels massive. Like, if you give that guy time, like, he's going to put the ball exactly where he wants to. The run game's only going to help. I really like Justin Herbert, man. I think that is great value. Like, I typically like to go for a QB higher, but I think if you kind of miss out on, like, the top 6, top 8 guys, like, just wait for Justin Herbert.
So what's his QB ADP right now, Shaun?
16.
So even in his worst year, he's only finished 1 spot below that.
Yep,
yeah,
and
like,
it was
in
PPR,
like a horrendously down bad.
He was hurt this year, right? So he missed a bunch of games. So this is skewed. He's been banged up the past couple years, and this offense has just been a mess. And Brandon Staley's been a mess. But look at this, boys. 2021 and 2020. That's Shane Steichen, right? We feel the effects of Shane Steichen as we're seeing with Jalen Hurts, right? This is why I love Shane Steichen so much. Is Greg Roman even close to Shane Steichen? No. But Greg Roman is a professional offensive coordinator that's created very solid offenses in his career. Now, are they low in play volume? Yes, they are. Are they going to throw the ball a ton? No, not historically. But they are able to score points. And I think Herbert is by far and away going to be able to cash this QB 16 ADP. Like, right now, he is currently going off the board at 111.
After Trevor Lawrence. If you're taking Trevor over Herb, I don't know what to tell you. It's like we've seen it 3 times. We haven't seen it once from Trevor. Like, I don't know how you can talk yourself into that. I think Herbert's such good value. To your point, like, he'll never be this low in terms of, like, off-season ADP again. I think he gets himself back up to, like, QB 10 next off-season.
Andrew Luck, 2014. This is what it's comping to. This is what it's comping to.
Twice, actually, for Jay. Man.
If he puts up the Andrew Luck season where Luck just went absolutely apeshit in 2014, oh my god,
I really miss Andrew Luck.
He was special video.
He was so the Vince McMahon memes used a lot inappropriately and, like, overused, but Luck really was special, man. What a quarterback.
It would be a treat to be talking about where Andrew Luck fit into my fantasy quarterback tiers. I would love to be chatting about Andrew
He'd be
Luck's
35.
game right now.
He'd be 35. He'd still be slanging it. He'd still be really good.
I'd have him top 12 off principle.
Just because he's a good guy.
So that's it for our QBs we're drafting. We've got 2 known commodities and then a mystery box. So we have go draft Kyler Murray is the QB. He's the QB 8. I have him as the QB 6. Go draft Caleb Williams. I have him right at ADP at the QB 14. And then Justin Herbert, I have him as a top 12 quarterback, and he's going in the outside of the top 15. He's going 16th on the board. So that's it for our 3 quarterbacks that we were flag planning. If these turn out to be incorrect, don't hold it against us. We made these opinions on July 29th, so it doesn't count. It doesn't count. It doesn't count. It only counts at the end of the year, right?
It's not real.
Thank you. It's not real. It's fake football. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Appreciate it. You'll want to stay tuned for our next episode, which is our fades. We're not going to be super positive all the time. Thank you, Reddy, again, for tuning in.
Spicy.
Until next time.